Last week, Vinny was talking about this film that we saw, Everything is Spiritual. And it's an excellent film. And it talks about it going from like the Big Bang and then moving forward, that the energy of life itself is moving forward when you have, atoms and then molecule cells and then human life and then the birth of consciousness. So we become more conscious. And it's moving toward humanity becoming absolutely, totally conscious of who we really are as human beings, to be totally conscious. And yet, we could see a lot of examples of being unconscious. Every one of us has areas in our life where we're not conscious. I was watching a little episode of The Twilight Zone, and there was a guy who was in the 1870s or so. He was a gunslinger or whatever. Actually, he really didn't want to be a gunslinger. He was just so great with the gun that back then people would challenge you, and you had to accept it. If you didn't, you were a coward. It was like crazy, right? So he was just so good. He was killing people, but it bothered him. And one thing led to another where he became an alcoholic. Maybe he was always an alcoholic. But I thought to myself, and so he was drinking this rum, and they were mocking him out, and he felt so weak, he could not stop drinking. And when you look back then, the alcoholic back then, they had no understanding of the disease of alcoholism. They don't know that there's certain human beings that when they have that alcohol with their biochemistry, it triggers them into a compulsion. So here was this guy, why can't I stop drinking? But there was no AA, there was no awareness or consciousness as to what causes alcoholism. So he felt like weak, he felt like a failure, he felt like a loser, and his self-esteem was so low because he had falsely drawn conclusions about himself because he didn't understand what was happening. And isn't that so with all of us as well? As we're sitting here, we have this concept of ourself. Now, very often, our concept of ourself, I like that again, as Tolle says, a mind-made sense of self, and that's it. So what we do is we walk around with who we think we are is the things that have happened to us and the conclusions that we've drawn about ourselves. Like, again, that story where I jumped in the water as an 8-year-old and almost drowned in front of everybody. You know what I mean? Look, buddy, if you've never gone in the water and you've never learned how to swim, you're going to drown. You're not an idiot. Well, maybe for jumping in the water, but... So we have these things. You can think of it in yourself, like times, things that have happened to you where we have a sense of ourself that we make it up. Sometimes it could even be good. I'm successful, I'm accomplished, I have this education or whatever, but you're still propping yourself up. I'm great at playing the guitar, and have that as an identity. But what happens when I can't play the guitar? Who am I then? So we have this false self. When we look at the Thessalonians in the reading, now this is only like 20, 25 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And here they are. They're busybodies. They're talking about people behind their back. They're minding everybody else's business. What's going on here? Why do they do that? Why do we do that at times? We never talk about it. But, right, it's like the passage where Jesus says, oh, you can see the speck in your brother's eye, but you don't see the beam in your own eye. So the false self loves to fault find, talk about people behind their back, the need to be right. I've got to make you wrong so that I could be right. Why do we do that? We do that because it makes us feel better. What we're doing is we're trying to prop ourselves up in order to make us feel a little bit better. Because underneath the human condition is the sense of three things. I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me, and I don't belong. These are the three core wounds of a human being. And we're walking around with that. Now, the false self kind of, could look a little bit like this. And we're kind of walking around with a, now don't be afraid.
We're not afraid, we're laughing.
Because actually, don't be afraid of the false self, because actually the false self is scared out of its mind. It's always afraid, and it's always got to compare itself with other people. How many bedrooms do you have in your house? 4. I have 11. It's always got to make another person wrong and talk about another person, because deep down it's scared out of its mind that I'm not good enough and I got to be a busybody like the Thessalonians. And I wonder if what happens is the divine comes by in the most powerful experience known to humanity. That the divine in Jesus Christ gives his life away on this cross because the ultimate wound of a human being is not feeling totally lovable, acceptable, free to be oneself. And so the power of this, it's so powerful that the false self has no chance against the power of the cross. So Christianity is never about you loving God. Christianity, and ask yourself this question, Christianity is, am I letting myself be loved by the divine? And when I can do that, when I can allow the power of this into my heart, the false self gets dropped and we're free. Is that what salvation is or redemption is? I'm freed and redeemed from this false sense of understanding myself. I was talking to a woman. She was in her 40s and she had cancer, and while she was going through her treatment, her mother was MIA. Just wasn't around. She would be doing different things. Other people had to take her to the doctor. And she would come in, and she's quite bright and has a nice job and things like that, and she kind of has a little bit of a bravado about her. But she would talk about this, like she goes, almost felt like I'm like a self-made person. I grew up, my mother, her father had died, her mother had remarried, and the mother actually said to her, now be good, don't do anything wrong and screw this up because, I don't want this guy to leave. As opposed to saying to the guy, hey, listen, I got news for you. This is my kid, and that's the most important thing. And she came in and she was saying how her mother came to her and said, I just want you to know something. I'm so mad at myself, I'm bothered by myself because I wasn't able to be there for you during your treatment. I love you so much. I couldn't handle it. So I had to run away. And as she's telling the story, she was getting choked up. And I said to her, ho, what's happening here? She says, I really got that my mother loved me, and my mother loves me. And it means so much. And I said to her, not only that, but you got that you're lovable, that who you are is totally loved. And what that felt like for her. So Jesus goes to this cross as this powerful act of love. And to ask ourselves, are we allowing that into our heart? Who I am is totally lovable and acceptable. That's what I think is so great about Good Shepherd, because we want to just have that atmosphere where we all embrace each other. We all have differences and things like that, but the bottom line is we're all part of the body of Christ. You know, it's interesting, people who work in hospice experience people who are near death. And many of them have these near-death experiences. And they talk about this moment of all of a sudden getting all of my egoic identifications, my need to be right, my need to be recognized, my need to be included, taking everything personally, my whole history. It seems to just go away. Before death, actually. And there just is this complete freeing and this experience of being who they always were. See, when you think about, like, we don't become the true self. We always are the true self. We just have to shed that false self to be totally free, to be who we are, to let go of grievances and grudges and what happened years ago. You know, when you look at Jesus, he instantly forgave people, right? Forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They're clueless. They're unconscious. Let it go. Don't take it personally. And these people experience this unbelievable freedom. It's called the kingdom of heaven. And isn't it interesting where Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and everything is granted unto you. So when we need and we want, we don't get it. And when we could let go of that and not need and not want and just be, it almost seems like it just comes to us. You need it, you don't get it. You don't need it, you get it. This overwhelming freedom. And I think that Christianity and all of us being here is to help each other to understand, why wait? Why wait until we leave our body? Because when we leave our body, we're going to have this experience of, you see this joy and this ecstasy and this freedom that you're experiencing? I want you to know something. You could have had that when you were in your body. So it's 9:30. Why not start right now?